Imagine standing at a podium, 7 months pregnant, when the man you married punches you in the face in front of 600 witnesses. Cameras everywhere, blood on marble. Your life destroyed in seconds. But that's just the beginning of Emma Harrington's nightmare. Her billionaire husband walks free. The system fails her. She loses everything, her home, her money, her hope. And just when she's standing at the edge of giving up, a silver-haired woman appears. A ghost from 30 years ago. Her mother. Alive. And she's been planning revenge for 3 decades. What follows is a manhunt that shocks the nation, a courtroom battle that breaks the internet, and a mother-daughter alliance that turns a beaten woman into a warrior queen. This is the true story of how one punch in a cathedral became the beginning of the end for a monster who thought money made him untouchable. The security camera footage would later be played in courtrooms across the country. Multiple angles, no sound, just the clinical, horrifying truth captured in high definition. Angle 1 showed Emma Harrington at the cathedral podium, 7 months pregnant in a pale blue gown, 600 guests watching from the pews. Angle 2 captured her husband Lucas rising from his seat in the front row, his face twisted with rage. Angle 3 recorded the moment his fist connected with her cheekbone in brutal slow motion. Angle 4 showed Emma's body arcing backward through the air. Angle 5 captured the impact as she crashed onto marble stairs, her body crumpling like a discarded doll. Angle 6 revealed blood pooling beneath her blonde hair as guests screamed silently, phones rising to record. Angle 7 showed a silver-haired woman in the back row standing, her face cold with fury. But that moment was still 72 hours away. On Thursday morning, Emma stood in the master bedroom of their $22 million penthouse, practicing her speech for the cathedral gala. The apartment overlooks Central Park from 40 stories up, all white marble and chrome and designer furniture that looked beautiful but felt like sitting on ice. Emma's reflection stared back from floor-to-ceiling mirrors, and she barely recognized herself anymore. Dark circles under her eyes, carefully covered with concealer, a maternity dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent, but couldn't hide her exhaustion. The Harrington Foundation has served over 10,000 families this year alone, Emma whispered to her reflection. Her voice cracked. She tried again. The Harrington Foundation has served. The penthouse door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. Lucas entered, phone pressed to his ear, not even glancing in her direction. "Tell them the deal closes Friday or I walk," he barked into the phone. "I don't care about their timeline. They need me more than I need them." Emma approached hesitantly, holding up 2 dresses. "Lucas, which one for Saturday? The blue or—" Lucas glanced up, irritation flashing across his handsome face. At 45, with silver temples and expensive suits, he looked like he'd stepped out of a business magazine. The kind of man who donated millions to charity and smiled for cameras. The kind of man people trusted. He covered the phone. "The blue. And for God's sake, get your hair done. You look exhausted." "I haven't been sleeping well. The baby kicks all night and—" "I don't need excuses, Emma. I need you to look presentable. This gala is crucial for my reputation. Don't embarrass me." He returned to his call and walked toward his study. Emma noticed something on his shoulder. A long, dark hair, not hers. She was blonde. Her hand trembled as she picked the hair off his expensive jacket. "Lucas, whose hair is this?" Lucas spun around. His expression shifted from annoyance to something darker, something that made Emma's stomach clench with fear. "Are you seriously starting this again?" His voice was quiet now, dangerous. "I just asked." In 3 strides, Lucas crossed the room. He grabbed Emma's wrist and twisted it sharply. She gasped in pain, instinctively cradling her belly with her other hand. "You're paranoid," Lucas said, his voice deadly calm. "That's why you have no friends. That's why no one likes you. You see problems where there aren't any because you're mentally unstable. You're hurting me." "I'm hurting you? You hurt me every day with your accusations, with your neediness, with your pathetic weakness." He released her wrist, leaving angry red marks that would bruise by evening. He straightened his tie, his movements precise and controlled. "Get yourself together. We have dinner with the board tonight. And Emma?" He turned back, his voice almost gentle now. "Wear long sleeves." He left. Emma sank onto the bed, cradling her bruised wrist. This wasn't new. This was just another Thursday morning in the Harrington penthouse. She pulled out her phone, started to text her friend Claire. Typed, "Can we talk? I need..." She deleted it. Lucas monitored her phone. He always knew. Across town in her Tribeca loft, Victoria Blackwell filmed her morning routine for Instagram stories. The space was all exposed brick in natural light, carefully curated to look effortlessly expensive. Tori's life was a performance, and she was very good at it. "Good morning, loves," she chirped to her phone camera, showing off her green juice. Starting the day with gratitude and positive energy. Remember, manifestation is real. 485,000 followers watched her every move. They saw the designer clothes, the luxury lifestyle, the seemingly perfect existence. They didn't see what happened behind closed doors. Her phone buzzed. A text from a contact saved simply as D appeared on screen. "Penthouse, noon, Emma has event planning." Tori smiled and filmed another story. "Unexpected lunch plans with my favorite person. Sometimes the universe just delivers." She added heart and sparkle emojis. By noon, Tori was in Lucas's study, the door locked, her phone positioned on the desk with the recording light hidden behind a book. She'd been recording every encounter for 4 years now. Insurance, she called it. Evidence if things went wrong. "When are you leaving her?" Tori asked, tangled in Lucas's arms on the leather couch. "Soon, after the gala. Once I secure the Sullivan inheritance paperwork, Emma's purpose is fulfilled." "What about the baby?" "The baby is a Harrington. It stays. Emma goes." Tori sat up, excitement lighting her face. "Lucas, I have something to tell you." She pulled a pregnancy test from her purse. Positive. "Surprise, we're having a baby. A real family." Lucas's expression was unreadable for a long moment. Then he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's perfect timing." He kissed her, and Tori melted into his embrace. She didn't see him pull out his phone behind her back, didn't see him text his lawyer. "Need prenup loophole review. Urgent." What Lucas didn't know was that every word, every confession, every damning statement was being recorded and backed up to a secret cloud account. Tori wasn't just a mistress, she was building a case. Friday afternoon found Emma walking through the vast space of St. Paul's Cathedral, overwhelmed by its sheer size. Father Dominic O'Brien, a kind-faced priest with gray hair and a gentle manner, guided her through the preparations. "You'll stand here at the main podium," he explained. "Don't worry about the crowd. Just speak from your heart, my dear." "There will be 600 people," Emma whispered. "I'm not good with crowds. Would you like to practice?" Emma stepped up to the microphone. She began her speech, but halfway through dizziness washed over her. She gripped the podium, knuckles white. Father Dominic rushed over, steadying her. "Mrs. Harrington, are you all right? Should I call someone?" "No, I'm fine, just pregnancy hormones." As she adjusted her sleeve, Father Dominic saw the bruises on her wrist. Purple and yellow now, shaped like fingerprints. His expression changed, years of experience reading the signs. "My child," he said gently but directly. "Those marks, how did you get them?" Emma pulled her sleeve down quickly. "I'm clumsy. I fell." "Emma," he used her first name deliberately. "I've been a priest for 30 years. Before that, I was a military chaplain. I've seen combat trauma. I know what you are hiding. If you're not safe at home..." "There you are!" A woman's voice echoed through the cathedral. Tori walked down the center aisle, designer heels clicking on marble, looking like she'd stepped off a magazine cover. "You must be Emma." Tori extended a perfectly manicured hand. "I'm Victoria Blackwell. Lucas asked me to help coordinate the gala." "I'm an event planner." Emma shook her hand, confused. "Lucas didn't mention hiring anyone." "Oh, you know Lucas, always juggling a million things." Tori's smile was bright and sharp. "Don't worry, I'll make sure Saturday is perfect. You just focus on looking beautiful and supporting your husband." The emphasis on your husband was subtle but deliberate. Emma's stomach nodded. Tori turned to Father Dominic. "Father, can we discuss the flower arrangements? Lucas wants white roses specifically." As Tori led Father Dominic away, she glanced back at Emma with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Emma stood alone in the vast cathedral, feeling very small. That night, Emma sat in bed reviewing her speech notes when Lucas entered from his study, loosening his tie. He'd been drinking. Not drunk, but the alcohol made him unpredictable. "Lucas, I wanted to ask about the woman at the cathedral. Victoria? You didn't tell me you hired. Lucas stopped mid-step and turned slowly. What about her? She said she's planning the gala, but I thought I was... You thought wrong. Tori is a professional. You're 7 months pregnant and can barely stay awake past 9 at night. I need someone competent. That's not fair. I've been planning this for months. Nothing you do is good enough, Emma. His voice rose dangerously. The seating chart had errors. The catering selection was pedestrian. You embarrass me constantly. Emma stood defensive. I found a hair on your jacket yesterday. A dark hair. Is Tori more than an event planner? It was the wrong question. Lucas crossed the room in 3 strides. He grabbed Emma by her upper arms and slammed her against the floor-to-ceiling window. The glass flexed. They were 40 stories up, nothing but sky behind her. Are you accusing me of something? No, You want to humiliate me the night before the biggest event of the year? You want to destroy everything I've built? His hands moved to her throat, squeezed. Not enough to truly choke her, but enough to make his point. Emma's hands went to her belly protectively. Tomorrow you will smile, Lucas whispered. You will give your speech perfectly. You will make me look good. Or I will make sure you lose everything. The penthouse, the money, the baby. Do you understand me? Emma nodded frantically. Lucas released her. She slid down the window, gasping for air. Lucas straightened his shirt, suddenly calm, almost gentle. Get some sleep. You look exhausted. He walked away. Emma stayed on the floor, cradling her belly, tears streaming silently down her face. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if trying to fight back against the fear flooding her system. She stayed there for a long time, wondering how her life had become this nightmare, wondering if there was any way out, wondering if she'd survive to see her baby born. Saturday evening arrived with all the pageantry of a royal wedding. St. Paul's Cathedral had been transformed into a monument to luxury and excess. White roses cascaded from every surface. Crystal chandeliers caught the light from hundreds of candles. A string quartet played Mozart in the corner. Red carpet stretched from the street to the cathedral doors, where photographers jostled for position. The elite of Manhattan arrived in designer gowns and custom tuxedos. Tech moguls, old money families, politicians, celebrities, everyone who mattered or thought they mattered was there. This was Lucas Harrington's night, his 10th annual charity gala, his moment to shine. Lucas worked the room like a seasoned politician, shaking hands and charming everyone within reach. He looked perfect in his custom tuxedo, silver hair perfectly styled, smile bright and confident. The philanthropist, the humanitarian, the man who donated millions to help struggling families. Nobody saw the monster beneath the mask. Emma stood near the podium in her pale blue gown, makeup expertly covering the bruises on her cheekbone and wrist. Her stylist had done excellent work. To the cameras, to the guests, she looked radiant, beautiful. The perfect trophy wife. Inside, she was falling apart. Her hands shook. Her vision kept blurring. The baby hadn't stopped kicking for hours, as if sensing her mother's terror. Emma had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt Lucas's hands on her throat. Claire arrived and immediately pulled Emma into a hug. You look beautiful. Are you ready? I don't think I can do this, Emma whispered. You'll be great. I'll be right in the front row, okay? Just look at me if you get nervous. Emma nodded, grateful for the one friend Lucas hadn't managed to drive away. What she didn't see was Lucas catching Claire's eye from across the room. Claire's face fell. She knew what that look meant. He wanted something. Tori arrived fashionably late in a stunning red dress that turned every head in the cathedral. She immediately posted an Instagram story, supporting amazing causes with amazing people, followed by charity and blessed hashtags. Within minutes, thousands of likes poured in. Father Dominic took the podium for opening remarks. Welcome, friends, to the 10th annual Harrington Foundation Gala. Tonight, we celebrate a decade of service to our community. Over these 10 years, the foundation has provided housing for 3,000 families, scholarships for over 500 students, and medical care for countless individuals in need. The crowd applauded. Lucas beamed, soaking in the praise. And now, Father Dominic concluded, please welcome the woman who has worked tirelessly to organize this beautiful evening, Mrs. Emma Harrington. Applause filled the cathedral. 600 faces turned toward Emma. She walked to the podium on trembling legs. The microphone seemed impossibly far away. The crowd seemed to expand, pressing in on her from all sides. Her vision blurred at the edges. She gripped the microphone stand and forced herself to breathe. The Harrington Foundation, she began, reading from her notes, has served over 10,000 families this year. We've built 12 new community centers across New York. We've provided scholarships to 300 students who might not otherwise afford college. Her voice trailed off. The words on the page swam together. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, making her gasp. The room tilted. Emma tried again. I'm sorry, I just need a moment. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Concerned murmurs. Camera phones rose. Lucas's face darkened like a gathering storm. He stood from his seat in the front row. Emma gripped the podium harder. We've made a difference in... Her voice cracked. I'm sorry. Lucas strode toward the podium. To the audience, it looked like a concerned husband rushing to help his struggling wife. But Emma saw his eyes. Cold, furious, terrifying. He reached the podium and grabbed her arm. You're fine, he hissed through a smile. Just finish the speech. I can't, Emma whispered. I feel dizzy. You useless? He yanked her from the microphone. Emma stumbled. 600 people watched. Cameras recorded. And Lucas Harrington, billionaire philanthropist, humanitarian of the year, loving husband, did the unthinkable. He raised his fist and punched his 7 months pregnant wife in the face. The sound cracked through the microphone system, amplified through speakers meant to carry prayers and hymns. A wet, brutal snap that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. Emma's head whipped to the side. Blood sprayed from her nose. Her body lifted off the ground from the impact, airborne for a split second that felt like eternity. Then she fell. Her body crashed onto the marble stairs leading to the altar. Once, twice, 3 times, her head hit the marble floor with a sickening crack. She went limp. Blood pooled beneath her blonde hair, spreading across white marble like spilled wine. Her hand rested on her stomach, unmoving. For one heartbeat, there was absolute silence. Then chaos erupted. Screams filled the cathedral. Guests jumped to their feet. Chairs clattered. The string quartet stopped mid-note. Someone shouted for help. Someone else yelled to call 911. A woman near the back fainted into her husband's arms. Father Dominic rushed forward and dropped to his knees beside Emma's broken body. His hands shook as he cradled her head, trying to stop the bleeding. "Call an ambulance," he shouted. "Now!" Claire stood frozen, her hand over her mouth, horror and guilt warring on her face. She'd known. She'd known Lucas was dangerous, and she'd done nothing. Phones were everywhere now, dozens of them, recording from every angle, capturing every second. The footage would be online within minutes, viral within the hour. Lucas stood over Emma's body, chest heaving, fists still clenched. For one moment, he looked down at what he'd done, and instead of remorse, his face showed only rage that she'd ruined his perfect event. "She's fine," Lucas said to the crowd, his voice shaking. "She's been unstable, having episodes. This is just..." "Someone call an ambulance," Father Dominic shouted again, his voice cutting through Lucas's excuses. In the back of the cathedral, almost unnoticed in the chaos, a silver-haired woman in an elegant black dress stood. Her face was a mask of cold fury, but her hands were steady as she pulled out her phone. Catherine Sullivan had waited 30 years for this moment. 30 years of hiding. 30 years of building evidence. 30 years of watching from the shadows as the man who'd tried to murder her terrorized her daughter. And now, Lucas had finally made his fatal mistake. In front of 600 witnesses and dozens of cameras, he'd shown the world exactly what he was. Kate made a call. "It's time," she said calmly. "He just gave us everything we need. Activate the protocol." She hung up and watched as paramedics rushed through the cathedral doors, watched as they carefully lifted Emma's unconscious body onto a stretcher, watched as Lucas tried to follow, only to be stopped by a tall detective with a badge. Kate's eyes never left her daughter. After 30 years, the war had finally begun, And this time, Catherine Sullivan was going to win. The ambulance screamed through Manhattan streets, sirens wailing. Emma lay on the gurney, oxygen mask covering her face, blood matting her blonde hair. The paramedics worked frantically, checking her vitals, monitoring the baby. 27-year-old pregnant female, approximately 7 months gestation, the lead paramedic called out. Blunt force trauma to the face and head. Possible skull fracture. Possible placental abruption. Blood pressure dropping. We need to move fast. Inside the ambulance, Father Dominic held Emma's hand and prayed. He'd insisted on riding with her. Someone needed to be there. Someone who wasn't the monster who'd put her in this condition. St. Luke's Hospital emergency room was ready when they arrived. Doctors and nurses swarmed as they wheeled Emma through the doors. Get her to trauma 2, the ER doctor shouted. Page obstetrics, stat. We need a fetal monitor now. In trauma 2, the medical team worked with practiced efficiency. Emma's vitals flashed on monitors. The ultrasound machine was wheeled in. A doctor pressed the wand to Emma's belly, and everyone held their breath. The baby's heartbeat filled the room. Fast at first, then slower, then dangerously slow. Fetal heart rate dropping, the OB/GYN announced. 140, 130, 120. We may need to do an emergency C-section. Emma's eyes fluttered open. She was confused, in pain, barely conscious. My baby, she whispered through the oxygen mask. Please save my baby. Emma, stay with us, the OB/GYN said firmly. We're doing everything we can. Just stay with us. Father Dominic squeezed her hand. You're not alone. God is with you. I'm with you. The monitor beeped, then stabilized. Heart rate climbing, the OB/GYN said, relief flooding her voice. 125, 135, 140. We're stable. Baby's stable. Collective sighs of relief filled the room. Emma broke down crying, tears mixing with blood on her face. Father Dominic bowed his head in gratitude. In the waiting room, Lucas Harrington sat flanked by 2 uniformed police officers. He looked composed, almost bored, scrolling through his phone as if this were a minor inconvenience rather than a catastrophe of his own making. Detective James Mitchell approached. 52 years old, 28-year veteran of the NYPD, Mitchell had seen a lot of terrible things in his career. But something about this case hit him personally. Maybe because he'd lost his younger sister to domestic violence 15 years ago. Maybe because he'd watched the videos and saw the cold calculation in Lucas's eyes. Maybe because he was just sick of rich men thinking they could get away with anything. Mr. Harrington, Mitchell said, pulling out his notepad, I need you to explain what happened at the cathedral tonight. Lucas barely looked up from his phone. My wife has been under tremendous stress lately. Her pregnancy has been difficult, both physically and mentally. Tonight she had some kind of episode during her speech. I was trying to help her off the stage when she lost her balance and fell. It's tragic, but it was an accident. Mitchell's jaw tightened. You're saying she fell. That's exactly what happened, Detective. Mr. Harrington, I have 47 videos from 47 different angles showing you punch your wife in the face. Lucas finally looked up, his expression perfectly calm. Then those videos are being misinterpreted by people who don't understand the context. I would never harm my wife. I love her. Before Mitchell could respond, Marcus Bennett swept into the waiting room. 56 years old, sleek and sharp as a blade, Marcus was one of Manhattan's most expensive defense attorneys. He'd never lost a high-profile case. His reputation was built on getting wealthy men out of trouble. Detective Mitchell, Marcus said smoothly, my client will not be answering any more questions tonight. Unless you are prepared to file charges immediately, we're leaving. We're still gathering evidence and witness statements. Then we'll wait for your call. Come on, Lucas. Mitchell stepped in front of them. Mr. Harrington will need to surrender his passport, and he's not to have any contact with Mrs. Harrington while we investigate. Noted, Marcus said. Now if you'll excuse us. They walked away. Lucas actually smirked as he passed Mitchell. The detective's hands clenched into fists. Mitchell met with District Attorney Sarah Peterson in her office at midnight. They reviewed the evidence. 47 videos from different angles, all showing the same thing. Lucas punching Emma, Emma falling, blood on marble. This is as open and shut as it gets, Peterson said. We file charges Monday morning, assault in the second degree, minimum. With the pregnancy factor, we might get attempted murder. When can we arrest him? After the charges are filed, we want everything airtight. This is Lucas Harrington. He has money, connections, and the best lawyers in the city. We get one shot at this. We don't miss. Mitchell nodded, feeling hopeful for the first time that night. Justice was coming. The system would work. Rich or poor, you couldn't punch your pregnant wife in front of 600 witnesses and walk away. He had no idea how wrong he was. Sunday morning, Emma woke in a private hospital room. Every part of her body hurt. Her face was swollen, her head pounded, but the baby was still moving, still fighting, and that was all that mattered. A nurse checked her vitals. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Harrington?" "Like I was hit by a truck," Emma whispered. "You've had a lot of visitors. Your friend Claire has been here all night. Father Dominic just left an hour ago, and there's someone else who's been waiting. She says she's family." Before Emma could ask who, the door opened. Victoria Blackwell walked in, perfectly styled even at 8 in the morning. She wore a designer maternity dress, her hand resting on her slightly rounded belly. Emma's blood ran cold. "What are you doing here?" "Oh, Emma," Tori said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "I'm so worried about you. I came as soon as visiting hours started." "Get out. I know we haven't been properly introduced, but I feel like I know you. Lucas talks about you constantly." Tori paused, letting that sink in. "I wanted you to hear this from me first, not from some tabloid or news report." She placed her hand on her stomach. "Lucas and I are having a baby. I'm 4 months along." Amina felt like she'd been punched all over again. The room spun. "I know this is painful to hear," Tori continued, "especially after what you've been through. But Lucas and I have been building a life together for a while now. He's been trying to find the right way to tell you about us, about the baby, and then last night happened and everything got complicated. Get out of my room." "Emma, I'm not here to hurt you. I actually feel sorry for you." Tori's voice took on a condescending tone. "Lucas told me how unstable you've been, the mood swings, the paranoia, the constant accusations. Pregnancy can do that to some women. It affects their mental state." She moved toward the door, then turned back. "I hope you get the help you need. Really, for your baby's sake." After Tori left, Emma collapsed into sobs. Everything she'd suspected was true. Lucas had been cheating. For how long? How many lies had she believed? The nurse rushed back in. "Mrs. Harrington, you need to calm down. Your blood pressure is spiking. Think of the baby." But Emma couldn't calm down. The betrayal, the violence, the humiliation, all of it crashed over her in waves. She cried until she had no tears left, until her body was empty and numb. Across town, Lucas sat in his penthouse surrounded by his legal team and a crisis management consultant named David Reed. "The videos are everywhere," David said, laptop open showing Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. "You're trending on every platform, and not in a good way. The hashtag #ArrestLucasHarrington has over 2 million tweets." "Can we get the videos taken down?" Lucas asked. "We can try, but Lucas, there are 47 different angles. It's already been downloaded and shared millions of times. We can't put this genie back in the bottle." Marcus Bennett leaned forward. "Here's what we do. We establish that Emma has a documented history of mental health issues, depression, anxiety, previous psychiatric treatment. We paint a picture of an unstable woman who's been having episodes. We claim Lucas was trying to help her, and the videos are being misinterpreted by people who don't understand the full context. She saw a therapist after her second miscarriage 3 years ago," Lucas said, "for grief counseling." "Perfect. We'll get her medical records, show a pattern of instability. We will have our own experts testify about pregnancy-induced psychosis, about how women can become irrational and even violent during pregnancy. We'll make the jury understand that what looks like assault was actually a desperate attempt to help someone having a mental health crisis." "What about the charges?" Lucas asked. Marcus smiled. "I've already had a conversation with Judge Thomas Carlson. He's receptive to our position." "Receptive how?" "Your foundation donated $3 million to the new courthouse wing last year. Judge Carlson has a very good memory." Monday morning arrived. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 10 o'clock. Emma wasn't present, still hospitalized and under doctor's orders to rest. But Detective Mitchell was there. The prosecutors were there. And most importantly, the evidence was there. The videos played on a large screen for Judge Carlson. All 47 angles. Lucas punching Emma, Emma falling, blood on marble. It was damning, undeniable. Justice seemed certain. Then Marcus Bennett stood and presented Emma's sealed medical records, which he'd somehow managed to get unsealed. The judge reviewed them carefully. The court notes, Judge Carlson said slowly, that Mrs. Harrington has a documented history of depression and anxiety, 2 previous psychiatric hospitalizations following pregnancy losses, a pattern of emotional instability. Mitchell stood. Your Honor, with all due respect, we have 47 videos showing. Detective, I've reviewed the evidence. While the videos are concerning, we must also consider the possibility of medical episode, confusion, or exaggeration. I'm setting bail at $500,000. Mr. Harrington will surrender his passport and wear an ankle monitor. He's confined to his residence pending trial. The courtroom erupted. Reporters scrambled for their phones. Mitchell stood frozen in shock. Marcus stood smoothly. Your Honor, my client requests that Mrs. Harrington not return to the marital home until her mental state can be properly evaluated, for her own safety and the safety of their unborn child. Granted, Mrs. Harrington is barred from the penthouse pending psychiatric evaluation. This hearing is adjourned. Lucas walked out smiling. He'd paid $500,000, the equivalent of pocket change, and bought his freedom. Mitchell watched him leave and felt sick. The system had failed. Money had won. Justice had lost. When Emma heard the news later that day, she thought she might die from grief. Banned from her own home. No access to her bank accounts, which Lucas had frozen pending investigation. Her abuser was free while she was trapped in a hospital bed. Claire came to visit that afternoon, but Emma couldn't even look at her. She felt completely alone in the world, betrayed by everyone, failed by the system that was supposed to protect her. She had $73 in cash. That was all she had left in the world. No home, no money, no justice, and a baby due in 2 months. Tuesday morning, Emma checked out of the hospital against medical advice. She had nowhere to go except a budget motel in Queens that cost $59 per night. Claire had packed 2 suitcases of clothes from the penthouse before Lucas changed the locks. Everything Emma owned in the world fit into those 2 bags. The motel room was depressing. Water-stained ceiling, broken air conditioning, carpet that hadn't been cleaned in years. But it was away from Lucas, and right now that was all that mattered. Emma sat on the sagging bed and broke down. She cried for an hour straight, deep sobs that shook her whole body. The baby kicked frantically, as if trying to comfort her mother. Emma placed both hands on her belly. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry you're being born into this mess. But we're going to survive. We have to. A knock on the door made her jump. Emma froze, terrified. Lucas wasn't supposed to contact her, but Lucas didn't follow rules. Emma, it's Claire. Open up. Emma opened the door and Claire rushed in, wrapping her in a hug. Oh my God, I've been so worried. I tried calling, but your phone went straight to voicemail. I turned it off. Lucas monitors it somehow. I don't know how, but he always knows everything. They sat on the bed together. Claire looked around the dismal room and her eyes filled with tears. Emma, you can't stay here. Let me help you. I have a friend in Boston. You could go there, start over. I can't leave. The court ordered me to stay in New York for the trial. If I run, I look guilty of something. And Lucas would use it against me. He'd say I'm unstable, that I abandoned my baby. Emma, listen to me. Claire gripped her hands. He's going to kill you. Maybe not today or tomorrow, but eventually. You have to get away from him. I know. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. Claire, I need to tell you something. Something I just found out. My mother didn't die when I was 2. Lucas told me she died, but I think he lied. I found some old documents in his safe, and they mentioned my mother, Catherine Sullivan, in present tense, like she's still alive somewhere. I don't understand, but Emma gasped and grabbed her stomach. Her face went white with pain. Emma, What's wrong? Something's not right. Emma tried to stand, blood soaked through her dress. A lot of blood. Too much blood. Oh, God. Claire grabbed her phone. Emma! Emma collapsed. Claire caught her before she hit the floor, lowering her down gently while frantically dialing 911. 911, what's your emergency? My friend is pregnant and she's bleeding. There's so much blood. Please help. The ambulance arrived within 8 minutes. Paramedics rushed Emma onto a stretcher. Claire rode with her, holding her hand, praying to anyone who might listen. At the hospital, doctors worked frantically. Emma was barely conscious, fading in and out. We're losing fetal heart rate, a doctor announced. 110, 95, 80, prep for emergency C-section. She's only at 7 months, a nurse said. The baby's not full term. We don't have a choice. Come on, baby, come on. Claire paced in the waiting room, tears streaming down her face. This was her fault. She'd known Lucas was dangerous. She'd seen the bruises Emma tried to hide. She should have done more, said more, helped more. A shadow fell across her. Claire looked up to see a woman she'd never met before. Silver hair, elegant black dress, commanding presence. The woman's eyes were sharp and knowing. Is Emma Harrington here? The woman asked. Who are you? My name is Catherine Sullivan. The woman's voice was steady, but Claire could hear the emotion beneath it. I'm Emma's mother. Claire stared. Emma's mother is dead. She died when Emma was 2. No, I've been in hiding for 30 years. Catherine sat down next to Claire. And I need you to tell me everything that's happened, everything Lucas has done. Please. In the operating room, the doctors managed to stabilize Emma without resorting to an emergency C-section. The bleeding slowed, then stopped. The baby's heartbeat returned to normal. It had been close. Too close. Hours later, Emma woke in a hospital bed. Catherine Sullivan sat beside her, watching her daughter sleep, tears streaming silently down her face. Emma's eyes opened. She saw Catherine and was confused. Who are you? My name is Catherine Sullivan. Kate reached for Emma's hand. And sweetheart, I'm your mother. Emma stared. Her mind struggled to process the words. My mother died when I was 2. Lucas told me. Lucas tried to kill me when you were 2. He pushed me off a 7th floor balcony at a business conference. I survived, barely. Spent months in intensive care. When I recovered, I realized he'd try again if he knew I was alive. So I disappeared, changed my identity, spent the last 30 years in hiding, waiting for the right moment to come back, to protect you. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I thought you abandoned me. My whole life, I thought you didn't want me. Never, Catherine's voice broke. Not for one single second, every day, every moment, I was thinking about you. Building evidence against Lucas, gathering proof of his crimes, waiting for him to make one fatal mistake. And 2 nights ago, he finally did. Emma collapsed into Catherine's arms, 30 years of grief and abandonment pouring out. They held each other and cried, mother and daughter reunited in the worst possible circumstances. They talked for hours. Catherine explained everything. How she'd built her tech company, Sullivan Tech Systems, worth $2.3 billion. How Lucas had tried to steal it by marrying her, then tried to murder her when she refused to sign over control. How she'd survived and spent 3 decades building an ironclad case against him. Emma, you're the heir to Sullivan Tech Systems. That's why Lucas married you, to steal your inheritance through you. How do we stop him? We go to the police with all my evidence. 30 years of financial crimes, attempted murder, fraud. He's done. For the first time in days, Emma felt hope. Then Claire came back with coffee and saw Catherine. Emma, who's this? Claire asked. Claire, this is my mother. Emma smiled through tears. She's alive. She's been alive this whole time. Can you believe it? Claire's face went white. Your mother? I know, it's impossible to believe, but she's been in hiding, gathering evidence against Lucas, and now we're going to, I need to use the bathroom, Claire interrupted, her voice shaking. I'll be right back. In the hallway, Claire pulled out her phone with trembling hands. She didn't want to do this. God, she didn't want to do this. But Lucas had her younger brother. Her undocumented younger brother, who could be deported or worse if Lucas made one phone call. She typed a text to Lucas. Her mother is alive. Catherine Sullivan. They're planning something in hospital room 412. She pressed send, then sat on the bathroom floor and cried. She just betrayed her best friend. But what choice did she have? Lucas held all the power. He always held all the power. Within an hour, Lucas's legal team filed emergency motions with the court. Catherine Sullivan was committing identity fraud. Catherine and Emma were conspiring to defraud the Harrington estate. An immediate arrest warrant was requested. By 6 o'clock Thursday morning, 4 NYPD officers burst into Emma's hospital room. Emma and Catherine were both asleep, Emma finally resting peacefully for the first time in days. "Catherine Sullivan," one officer called out. Kate stood calmly. "Yes?" "You're under arrest for identity fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and falsifying death records. You have the right to remain silent." "No," Emma screamed. "She's my mother. She's the victim. Lucas tried to kill her." Kate didn't resist. She held her hands out for the handcuffs, her face calm even as Emma fell apart. "Remember who you are," Kate said as they led her to the door. "You're a Sullivan. We don't break. We don't give up. We fight." They dragged Kate away. Emma collapsed in the hospital bed alone again. She'd found her mother after 30 years, only to lose her hours later. The system had failed her again. Lucas's money and connections had won again. Emma was utterly, completely alone. Emma was discharged from the hospital that same afternoon. She had nowhere to go. She tried calling Claire, but it went straight to voicemail. She tried again and again. No answer. She returned to the dingy motel room with its water-stained ceiling and broken air conditioning, turned on the television while she tried to figure out what to do next. Breaking news flashed across the screen. Lucas and Tori stood on the courthouse steps, surrounded by reporters and cameras. "Mr. Harrington, do you have a statement about the assault charges?" a reporter called out. Lucas looked directly into the camera, his expression perfectly crafted to show concern and pain. "My wife is mentally ill. I'm devastated by what's happening to her. I've tried to get her help, but she's refused treatment. I'm now requesting the court grant me emergency custody of our unborn child for its own safety. I can't stand by and watch Emma harm herself and our baby." Then Tori stepped forward. Lucas took her hand, and Emma's stomach dropped. "I'd also like to announce," Lucas continued, "that Victoria Blackwell has agreed to be my wife. We're expecting a child together, and we're looking forward to building a family. A stable, healthy family, a fresh start for all of us." He slid an engagement ring onto Tori's finger. Cameras flashed. Tori beamed, her hand on her belly, looking radiant and victorious. Emma watched, shaking so hard the remote fell from her hand. Her phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Emma, did you enjoy the announcement?" Lucas's voice was smooth as silk, dripping with satisfaction. "You are not supposed to contact me. I'm calling from my lawyer's phone. Legal loophole. Now listen very carefully because I'm only going to say this once. Tomorrow there's a custody hearing. I'm seeking full custody of our baby, and I'm having you declared mentally unfit to be a mother." Emma's hands shook so hard she almost dropped the phone. "Your so-called mother is in jail for fraud," Lucas continued. "Claire isn't answering your calls because she's been working for me all along. You have no money, no home, no witnesses who will back your story. You have nothing. I have 47 videos. You have nothing. I own the judges. I own the lawyers. I own this entire city. You were nothing before you met me, and you'll be nothing after me. The only question is whether I let you keep the baby or whether I take that too." Silence. Emma couldn't breathe. "See you in court tomorrow, Emma. 10 o'clock sharp. Wear something nice, not that you have anything nice left." He hung up. Emma sat in the dim motel room, hand on her belly, staring at the wall. She'd lost everything. Her home, her mother, her best friend had betrayed her. Lucas was getting married to his mistress and trying to steal her baby. The hearing was in less than 24 hours, and she had no lawyer, no money, no way to fight back. Sometimes there is a moment in every person's life when they stand at the edge of an abyss, when giving up seems like the only rational choice, when the pain is so overwhelming that ending it seems like mercy. Emma stood and walked to the window. 3rd floor. High enough? She put her hand on the window latch. The baby kicked. Hard. Then again. And again. like tiny fists pounding against her ribs, saying, don't you dare give up on us. Emma looked down at her belly, placed both hands over where her daughter was fighting for life. You're right, she whispered. We're fighters. We're Sullivan women. She stepped away from the window, washed her face in the grimy sink, looked at herself in the cracked mirror. For the first time in 5 years, she didn't see the broken woman Lucas had created. She saw the woman she used to be. The woman with a PhD in forensic accounting. The woman who was brilliant and capable and strong before Lucas systematically destroyed her self-worth. He thinks I'm broken, Emma said to her reflection. That's his first mistake. She opened her laptop, the one thing Lucas didn't know about because she had bought it with cash from a pawn shop months ago. Started searching through old files she'd secretly copied from Lucas's computer. Emma worked through the night. 2 in the morning, 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning. She didn't sleep. She had work to do. And then she found it. Lucas's entire empire was a house of cards built on stolen money. Every asset, every investment, every dollar traced back to Catherine Sullivan's company. He'd been laundering money for 30 years through the Harrington Foundation, the very charity he used to build his reputation. Emma copied everything, every document, every transaction, every piece of evidence. At 6 in the morning, she called Detective Mitchell. This is Mitchell, he answered groggily. Detective, it's Emma Harrington. I have evidence, real evidence. Can you meet me? At 7 o'clock, Emma sat across from Mitchell in a 24-hour diner. She slid a USB drive across the table. Everything Lucas owns, he stole from my mother, Emma said. This proves it. Financial records going back 30 years. Shell companies, money laundering through his foundation, tax evasion, fraud, everything. Mitchell plugged the drive into his laptop. His eyes widened as he scrolled through the documents. Holy hell! Emma, this is enough to seize all his assets, freeze his accounts, charge him with racketeering. There's more. I need to talk to Lucas's father, Robert Harrington. The old man in the wheelchair? Lucas put him in that wheelchair, beat him so badly he had a stroke, and Robert knows where all the bodies are buried. Literally. Mitchell made a call. An hour later, they were driving to Robert Harrington's estate in Westchester. The old man sat in his wheelchair in a sunroom overlooking manicured gardens. A nurse hovered nearby. Robert was frail, his hands shaking, but his eyes were clear. Emma, he said weakly when she entered. I'm so sorry, so very sorry. Emma knelt beside his wheelchair. Mr. Harrington, I know you're afraid of Lucas, but I need your help. I need you to tell the truth about what he's done. Robert's hands shook harder. He killed his mother, my wife. She was going to divorce him, take half of everything I'd built. Lucas was 19. He pushed her down the stairs and made it look like an accident. I knew. I've always known, but I was too afraid to say anything. Will you testify against him? Long silence. The old man's eyes filled with tears. Yes, I'll testify. I'll give you everything. Bank records, property deeds, evidence of other crimes. It's time. Past time. Emma felt hope rising in her chest for the first time in days. They had evidence. They had testimony. They had a chance, but she didn't know that across town, Lucas was already planning his endgame. And this time, he wasn't going to let Emma walk away alive. Friday morning, 10 o'clock. The custody hearing was in 3 hours. Detective Mitchell fitted Emma with a wire in an unmarked police van. FBI agent Sarah Brooks supervised, her expression serious. We need him to confess to something on tape, Brooks explained. Anything. The assault, the attempted murder of your mother, the financial crimes. Just get him talking. He won't meet with me, Emma said. He knows better. Tell him you're ready to give up, that you'll sign over custody if he gives you enough money to disappear. Men like Lucas can't resist victory. He'll want to see you broken one last time. Emma made the call. Lucas answered on the first ring. What do you want, Emma? I want to talk, just the two of us, neutral location. I'm ready to work something out. Silence, then. Father Dominic's office at the cathedral. 11 o'clock, come alone. He hung up. Mitchell looked at Emma. Are you sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. At 11 o'clock, Emma walked into the small office behind the cathedral altar. Lucas was already there, standing by the window, looking out at Manhattan. He turned when she entered. Emma, you look terrible. Lucas, I can't do this anymore. The fighting, the court battles, all of it. I just want it to be over. Lucas smiled. She was finally breaking, finally surrendering. I'm listening. I'll sign over full custody. I'll disappear from New York, from your life, forever. Just please, give to me enough money to survive, to start over somewhere else. Please. Lucas walked toward her slowly. You'll sign full custody of the baby to me and Tori? Yes. You'll leave New York and never contact me or the baby again? Yes, just please, Lucas. I'm begging you. Lucas leaned back against the desk, studying her. She looked broken, defeated. Finally, everything he'd wanted from the beginning. You know what's funny? He said. I never wanted you. I wanted your mother's money. When I pushed Catherine off that balcony 30 years ago, I thought I'd finally be free of the Sullivan family. But somehow she survived. So I had to wait, had to play the long game. Marry you, get access to the Sullivan Trust through you. Emma's heart pounded. The wire was recording every word. You were always just a means to an end, Lucas continued, his voice casual, almost bored. That baby, it's a Harrington asset, leverage, nothing more. I'll raise her to hate you, to think you abandoned her because you were crazy, just like I made you think your mother abandoned you. He stood and walked toward Emma. She instinctively stepped back. But here's the thing, Emma, you've become a liability. Too many people know too much. Your mother is alive. That reporter from the Times keeps calling. Your little friend Claire is getting a conscience. Loose ends need to be tied up. He reached into his jacket. Emma saw the gun and her blood turned to ice. Lucas, what are you, Barry? Did you really think I'd let you walk away? He raised the gun. You're going to have a tragic accident. Pregnant woman, mentally unstable, takes her own life in a cathedral. Poetic, really. Lucas, please. Goodbye, Emma. The doors burst open with a deafening crash. FBI, drop the weapon! Agent Brooks stormed in with 20 agents behind her, all with guns drawn, all aimed at Lucas. Lucas spun toward them, then looked back at Emma. His eyes dropped to her collar where the wire was visible. His face contorted with rage. You bitch! He aimed the gun at Emma. She screamed. Brooks fired. The bullet hit Lucas's shoulder. He dropped the gun, screaming in pain. But in the chaos, Lucas ran. He crashed through the side door of the cathedral office, holding his bleeding shoulder. Suspect fleeing, Brooks shouted. All units pursue! Lucas burst out of the cathedral into Manhattan streets. Tourists scattered. Car horns blared. He carjacked a taxi at gunpoint and sped away. The manhunt had begun. Within minutes, every news station in the country broke the story. Billionaire Lucas Harrington flees FBI, armed and dangerous. Helicopter footage showed police swarming the cathedral. Lucas's face appeared on every screen, every phone, every news ticker. The city was on lockdown. At FBI headquarters, Agent Brooks coordinated the manhunt from a command center filled with screens and agents. Detective Mitchell, Emma, and Catherine Sullivan, who'd been released on emergency bail due to the new evidence, watched the chaos unfold. We've got eyes on his vehicle, an agent KG'd out. He's heading north on the West Side Highway toward Westchester. Catherine leaned forward. He's running to his backup location, his escape plan. How do you know? Brooks asked. Because I've been tracking him for 30 years. He has a cabin in upstate New York, bought through a shell company called Northern Holdings, LLC. That's where he's going. Brooks immediately coordinated with New York State Police. I want that cabin surrounded, roadblocks on every highway going north. Helicopters in the air. He doesn't get away. On the screens, they watched Lucas's stolen taxi weave through traffic. He was bleeding, desperate, dangerous. Emma watched and felt no pity, only a cold, hard satisfaction that justice was finally coming. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Your mother was right about everything. I'm sorry I helped him. The recordings are on their way to the FBI. Love, Tori. Emma showed the text to Brooks. Tori has recordings, 4 years of Lucas's confessions. Get her on the phone, Brooks ordered. Now. Within the hour, Tori Blackwell arrived at FBI headquarters with her lawyer and 4 years of audio and video recordings. Every affair, every confession, every threat, every crime. "I'm pregnant with his baby," Tori said quietly, her Instagram-perfect veneer finally cracked. "But I can't bring a child into this world knowing I protected a monster. He was going to kill Emma. He told me so. Said he'd make it look like suicide." She handed over her phone. "It's all there. It's everything." Brooks looked at Emma. "We have him, the wire recording, Tori's recordings, your mother's financial evidence, Robert Harrington's testimony. There's no judge, no lawyer, no amount of money that can save him now." Emma felt tears streaming down her face, not from sadness, from relief, from justice. Catherine put her arm around her daughter. "It's almost over, sweetheart. Almost over." Lucas Harrington drove north with one hand, the other pressed against his bleeding shoulder. Pain screamed through his body with every heartbeat. The stolen taxi's radio crackled with police reports. His face was on every station. Units, suspect is considered armed and dangerous. Lucas Harrington, white male, 45 years old, 6'2", silver hair, last seen heading north on Route 9. He was a fugitive. Him, Lucas Harrington, billionaire, philanthropist, the man who donated millions to charity and smiled for cameras, now reduced to bleeding in a stolen taxi, running for his life. The cabin was 2 hours away in the Catskills. Remote, off-grid, stocked with supplies and cash. He'd planned for this, prepared for the possibility that everything might fall apart. He always had a backup plan. Behind him, police helicopters appeared on the horizon. Lucas pressed the accelerator harder. The taxi's engine screamed. At the FBI command center, Agent Brooks watched the pursuit on multiple screens. Helicopter feeds, traffic cameras, police dash cams. Lucas was heading exactly where Catherine said he would. "State police have roadblocks set up on every highway north of Poughkeepsie," an agent reported. "He's boxed in." "Where's the nearest exit before the roadblocks?" Brooks asked. "Route 28, about 5 miles ahead of his current position." "That's where he'll go. Get units to that exit now." Lucas saw the flashing lights ahead. Roadblock. He swerved onto Route 28 at the last second, tires screaming. The taxi fishtailed but stayed on the road. He was 10 miles from the cabin now. Just 10 more miles and he could disappear into the woods. Wait out the search. Slip across the border to Canada eventually. But then the tire blew. The taxi spun out of control, crashed through a guardrail, and slammed into a tree. The airbag deployed, hitting Lucas in the face. Blood poured from his nose. He kicked open the door and ran into the woods. Behind him, police cars screeched to a stop. Dozens of officers poured out. K-9 units barked. Helicopter spotlights swept through the trees. "Lucas Harrington, you're surrounded. Come out with your hands up." Lucas ran deeper into the woods. Branches tearing at his clothes, his expensive suit destroyed. His shoulder screamed with pain. Blood soaked through his shirt. He reached the cabin as darkness fell, stumbled inside, locked the door, turned on the lights. The cabin was exactly as he'd left it. Rustic but comfortable, stocked with supplies. He opened the safe, $2 million in cash, fake passports, offshore account information. Everything he needed to start over. He bandaged his shoulder roughly, hands shaking, poured himself whiskey, drank it straight from the bottle, turned on the television. His face was on every channel. Manhunt continues for Lucas Harrington, who fled FBI custody after being recorded attempting to murder his pregnant wife. Catherine Sullivan appeared on CNN, Emma's mother, the woman who should have died 30 years ago, but somehow survived to ruin everything. "Lucas Harrington is a coward who preys on women," Catherine said calmly into the camera. "He tried to kill me, he terrorized my daughter, and now he's running because he knows justice is finally coming. I'm offering a $10 million reward for information leading to his capture. He will face justice. I promise you that." Lucas threw the bottle at the television, glass shattered, whiskey poured down the screen. His burner phone rang. Only one person had this number. "Tori?" "Lucas." Her voice was thick with tears. "The FBI came to my apartment. They're seizing everything. They know about the money laundering, the shell companies, all of it. Your father testified against you. He told them you killed your mother. Lucas's mind reeled. His father, that senile old man, had actually grown a spine. Tori, did you tell them about the cabin? What? No, I would never buy a idea. Did you tell them anything? Silence, then quietly, they have my phone, all my recordings. Lucas, I'm so sorry, but I couldn't protect you anymore. You were going to kill Emma. You told me you were going to make it look like suicide. Lucas hung up, realized the truth. Tori had been recording him for years. All his confessions, all his threats, all his crimes. She'd given everything to the FBI. It was over. Completely, utterly over. Outside, he heard helicopter rotors, saw spotlights sweeping the trees around the cabin, heard megaphones. Lucas Harrington, this is the FBI. You're surrounded. Come out with your hands up. Lucas looked around the cabin, at the money that was now useless, at the passports that would never get him across any border, at the life he'd built on lies and violence and stolen money. He loaded his pistol, drank more whiskey, considered his options. Surrender meant life in prison. He'd seen the evidence against him, the recordings, the videos, the testimony. He'd spend the rest of his life in a cage. Fighting meant death by police. Probably painful, definitely humiliating. Running meant being hunted through the woods like an animal until they caught him anyway. He put the gun to his temple. His hand shook. This way he controlled his own ending. This way he won. His finger tensed on the trigger. Then he heard a second helicopter landing. Looked out the window. Saw a black, unmarked helicopter setting down in the clearing beside the cabin. The door opened. Catherine Sullivan stepped out. Lucas's eyes widened. Impossible. She was supposed to be in police custody. Catherine walked toward the cabin, calm and purposeful. Police parted for her. She stopped 30 feet from the door. Lucas, she called out. It's over. Come out. Lucas opened the door, gun in hand. Dozens of weapons aimed at him from all directions. He was trapped. Truly trapped. You should be dead, he screamed. But I'm not. Catherine's voice was steady. And for 30 years, I've been 3 steps ahead of you. Building evidence, gathering witnesses, waiting for you to make one fatal mistake. And 2 nights ago, you finally did. You hit your pregnant wife in front of 600 witnesses and 4 dozen cameras. You couldn't help yourself. You had to prove you were in control. I had everything. I built an empire. You built nothing. You stole everything. My company, my money, my daughter's childhood. You're a thief and a coward who beats pregnant women. Lucas raised the gun to his own head. I'll never go to prison. Never. Then pull the trigger and prove you're exactly what I said you were. A coward who can't face the consequences of his actions. His finger trembled on the trigger. He could end it. Right now, on his terms. Catherine pulled out her phone, showed him the screen. Emma in a hospital gown, holding a newborn baby. She gave birth 3 hours ago, Catherine said. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Emma named her Grace Catherine Sullivan. Not Harrington. Sullivan. Your daughter will never know your name. She'll never visit you in prison. She'll never think about you. You'll die alone in a cell, completely forgotten. Lucas stared at the image, his daughter, the baby he'd used as leverage, as an asset, as a tool. She was real now, alive, and she would never know him. Something broke inside Lucas Harrington. The gun dropped from his hand. He fell to his knees in the dirt, sobbing. I had everything, he whispered. I was everything. You had nothing, Catherine said coldly. You were nothing, just a man who thought power meant hurting people weaker than you. And now the whole world knows exactly what you are. FBI agents rushed forward, cuffed him, read him his rights. Lucas Harrington, you're under arrest for attempted murder, assault, fraud, racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. As they dragged him toward the police car, Lucas looked back at Catherine one last time. This isn't over. Yes, Lucas, Catherine said. It is. They shoved him into the car and drove away. Catherine stood in the clearing, watching the taillights disappear into the darkness. After 30 years, it was finally done. 8 weeks later, the trial of Lucas Harrington began at the federal courthouse in Manhattan. It was the biggest trial the city had seen in decades. Every major news outlet sent crews. Reporters camped outside the courthouse. The story had everything: wealth, violence, betrayal, a manhunt, a dramatic capture. Inside courtroom 14, Emma sat in the front row behind the prosecution table. Baby Grace slept in Catherine's arms beside her. Emma looked different now, stronger. Her blonde hair was styled simply. She wore a navy blue suit, no expensive designer clothes anymore. No need to play the trophy wife. Lucas sat at the defense table in an orange prison jumpsuit, wrists and ankles shackled. Marcus Bennett sat beside him, looking physically ill. The defense attorney, who'd never lost a case, now faced an impossible task: defending a man caught on 47 videos punching his pregnant wife, recorded on FBI wire attempting murder, and exposed by 4 years of his mistress's recordings. The prosecution called Emma first. She walked to the stand, was sworn in, and sat down. Looked directly at Lucas. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Jennifer Martinez, approached gently. "Mrs. Harrington, can you tell the jury about your relationship with the defendant?" Emma took a breath. "I met Lucas Harrington 7 years ago at a charity event. He was charming, successful, generous. Everything I thought I wanted. We married after 6 months. For the first year, he was perfect. Then things changed." "How did they change?" "He became controlling. Monitored my phone, my email, my bank accounts. Isolated me from friends and family. Told me I was stupid, worthless, crazy. Made me believe I couldn't function without him." "Did he ever hurt you physically?" "Yes, the first time was 2 years into our marriage. I questioned him about a text message from another woman. He slapped me, apologized immediately, bought me flowers, said it would never happen again. But it did, again and again. Slaps became punches. Punches became choking. I had 18 emergency room visits in 5 years. He always had an excuse. I fell downstairs. I walked into a door. I was clumsy." The jury listened, faces grim. "What happened on the night of the cathedral gala?" Emma's voice strengthened. "I was 7 months pregnant. Lucas had been threatening me for days. He wanted me to give a perfect speech to make him look good in front of his wealthy donors. I tried, but I got dizzy. The baby was kicking. I stumbled over my words. Lucas became enraged. In front of 600 people, he walked up to the podium and punched me in the face. I fell down marble stairs. I nearly died. My baby nearly died. And after that, Lucas used his money and connections to avoid justice. A corrupt judge set minimal bail. Lucas was free while I had nowhere to go. He got engaged to his pregnant mistress while I was homeless. He tried to take custody of my baby. He attempted to murder me in Father Dominic's office. If the FBI hadn't been there, I'd be dead." Martinez played the videos. All 47 angles of the cathedral assault. The jury watched in silence. Several jurors had tears in their eyes. Then she played the FBI wire recording. Lucas's voice filled the courtroom. "You were always just a means to an end. That baby, it's a Harrington asset, leverage, nothing more. Did you really think I'd let you walk away? You're going to have a tragic accident." The jury's expressions hardened. Martinez called Catherine Sullivan next. Catherine walked to the stand with dignity, told her story, how Lucas had tried to murder her 30 years ago, how she'd survived and spent 3 decades building evidence against him, how she'd watched helplessly as he terrorized her daughter. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Marcus Bennett asked on cross-examination, trying desperately to find any weakness. "Because I needed ironclad evidence," Catherine said calmly. "Lucas Harrington has money, connections, and power. If I'd come forward too soon, he would have destroyed any case against him. So I waited. I built evidence he couldn't refute. And when he made his fatal mistake, when he showed the world exactly what he was, I struck." The prosecution called Tori Blackwell. She took the stand, 8 months pregnant now, looking nothing like the Instagram influencer who'd posed for perfect photos. She looked tired, scared, but determined. I was Lucas's mistress for 4 years, Tori testified. I thought I loved him. I thought we'd build a life together. But I recorded our conversations because some part of me knew he was dangerous. I'm pregnant with his baby, and he told me he was planning to kill Emma and make it look like suicide. That's when I realized I couldn't protect him anymore. I couldn't bring a baby into this world knowing I'd helped a murderer. The prosecution played excerpts from Tori's recordings. 4 years of Lucas's confessions, affairs, threats, plans, crimes. The defense had no rebuttal. How do you refute video evidence? Audio recordings? Dozens of witnesses? Marcus Bennett called Lucas to the stand in a desperate final attempt. Mr. Harrington, do you deny punching your wife at the cathedral? Lucas looked at the jury, knew it was over. No. Do you deny attempting to murder Catherine Sullivan 30 years ago? She deserved, Lucas started, then caught himself. But it was too late. The courtroom erupted. The judge gavelled for order. Emma's victim impact statement came on the final day of testimony. She stood at the microphone, baby Grace in Catherine's arms in the front row, and spoke clearly. For 5 years, Lucas Harrington made me believe I was nothing, worthless, broken, insane. Well, he isolated me from everyone I loved. He made me believe my mother was dead when he was the one who tried to kill her. He hit me, choked me, terrorized me every single day. And when I was 7 months pregnant, giving a speech at his charity gala, he punched me in the face because I stumbled over a word. She looked directly at Lucas. But I survived. My daughter survived. And my daughter will grow up knowing that when someone tries to destroy you, you fight back. She'll know that justice is possible. She'll know that no amount of money or power can protect you if you're guilty. She'll know that Sullivan women don't break. We win. The courtroom erupted in applause. The judge allowed it. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. The verdict was unanimous on all counts. Attempted murder of Catherine Sullivan, guilty. Attempted murder of Emma Harrington, guilty. Assault in the first degree, guilty. Domestic violence, guilty. Conspiracy to commit murder, guilty. Fraud, guilty. Money laundering, guilty. Racketeering, guilty. Lucas sat motionless as the verdicts were read. His empire, built on lies and stolen money and violence, had finally collapsed. Judge Rebecca Hayes looked down at Lucas from the bench. Mr. Harrington, in my 30 years as a judge, I have never encountered such calculated cruelty. You systematically destroyed women, believing your wealth made you untouchable. You were wrong. You are sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole. Consecutive sentences on all counts. Minimum 40 years before any possibility of review. You will die in prison. That is my final word. Bailiffs dragged Lucas away. He didn't struggle. He was already broken, a shell of the man who'd once commanded boardrooms and charity galas. Emma watched him disappear through the courtroom doors and felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just relief that it was finally, truly over. 1 year later, Emma stood at the podium in St. Paul's Cathedral, the same cathedral where Lucas had destroyed her. But today, it looked completely different. Banners hung from the vaulted ceiling. Survivors stand together. 1,500 people filled the pews. Domestic violence survivors, advocates, celebrities, journalists from around the world. This was the inaugural Sullivan Foundation Gala, and it was the biggest event the cathedral had ever hosted. Emma wore a crimson gown that made her look powerful and alive. 14-month-old Grace sat on her hip, giggling and pulling at Emma's pearl necklace. Catherine stood beside them, proud and elegant in midnight blue. A year ago, Emma began, her voice strong and clear, I stood in this cathedral as a victim, beaten, broken, terrified. I thought I would die here. I thought my daughter would die here. She paused, letting the words sink in. But my mother appeared, the woman I thought had abandoned me when I was 2, the woman who'd actually been in hiding for 30 years, building a case against my abuser, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And together, we didn't just survive. We fought back, and we won. Standing ovation. The applause went on for a full minute. The Sullivan Foundation has helped 10,000 women escape abuse this year, Emma continued. We've built safe houses in all 50 states. We've passed legislation in 38 states making coercive control a crime. We've trained 5,000 police officers in domestic violence response. We've provided legal representation for 2,000 women who couldn't afford lawyers. We've saved lives. She clicked a remote. Lucas's prison mugshot appeared on the screen. He looked old now, gray and shrunken. Lucas Harrington is in ADX Florence Supermax prison in Colorado. He spends 23 hours per day in solitary confinement. He will never breathe free air again. Every penny of his fortune, all $800 million built on stolen money, has been seized by the federal government. That money is now saving lives. Another click. A beautiful building appeared on screen. This is the Catherine Sullivan Memorial Center in Brooklyn. It houses 200 women and children fleeing abuse. It has fortress-level security, legal aid offices, therapy rooms, job training facilities, daycare, medical services, and most importantly, hope. It's the first of 10 centers we're building across the country. Catherine joined Emma at the podium. Mother and daughter stood together, Grace between them. I lost 30 years with my daughter, Catherine said into the microphone. 30 years I can never get back, but I'd do it again if it meant protecting her. Because that's what mothers do. We protect, we endure, we fight, and we win. Emma held Grace up so the cameras could see her clearly. This is Grace Catherine Sullivan. She'll grow up knowing her grandmother. She'll grow up in a world where domestic violence is taken seriously, where survivors are believed, where justice is possible. She'll grow up knowing that her mother stood up to a monster and won. Emma's voice strengthened, filled the cathedral. To every woman watching who's trapped right now, who thinks there's no escape, who believes her abuser's lies, that she's worthless. You are not alone. You are not crazy. You are not weak. You are strong. You will survive, and you will win. Call 1-800-799-7233, the National Domestic Violence Hotline. We're waiting, we believe you, and we will help you escape. We will help you fight. We will help you win. The cathedral shook with applause and tears. Emma looked out at the 1,500 faces, at the survivors in the front rows, at the women who'd found safety and hope through the foundation. She saw Claire there working full-time for the foundation now, trying to earn redemption through service. She saw Father Dominic, whose cathedral now housed a permanent domestic violence resource center. She saw Detective Mitchell, who'd received the department's Medal of Valor for his work on the case. She saw Tori in the back row, holding a 6-month-old baby boy. Tori had served 6 months in minimum security for her role in helping Lucas. Now she was out, raising her son alone, teaching classes about recognizing abusive relationships. Their eyes met across the cathedral. Tori nodded, Emma nodded back. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. The gala concluded with a moment of silence for all the women who hadn't survived their abusers. Then Emma introduced a video montage. Clips from the 47 cathedral videos, interspersed with Lucas's arrest, his trial, his sentencing, and finally footage of the 10 Sullivan Foundation centers across the country. The final shot showed Emma, Catherine, and Grace on the cathedral steps at sunset, 3 generations of Sullivan women. Unbroken, Emma's voiceover played. They tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds, and now we're a forest. The video ended. The cathedral erupted in applause that went on for 5 full minutes. After the gala, Emma and Catherine stood on those same cathedral steps with Grace. Cameras flashed. Reporters asked questions. But Emma only answered one. What would you say to Lucas Harrington if you saw him today? Emma looked directly into the camera, knowing he would see this in his prison cell. I would say thank you. Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like. Not power over others, not violence, not control. Real strength is surviving. Real strength is healing. Real strength is using your pain to help others. You tried to destroy me, Lucas. Instead, you created something you could never be. You created a survivor who became a warrior. And now thousands of women are free because you made one fatal mistake. You underestimated me. She smiled. That was your last mistake. Catherine put her arm around Emma. Grace reached for her mother's face, and Emma kissed her tiny hand. The three of them walked away from the cathedral into the golden sunset toward the car that would take them home. Not to a penthouse prison, home to a brownstone in Brooklyn filled with laughter and safety and love, home to a life Emma had built from ashes, home to freedom, 3 years later. Emma stood in the conference room of Sullivan Tech Systems, looking out over Manhattan. The company her mother had built, the empire Lucas had tried to steal, was now hers. She'd spent 3 years learning the business, earning respect, proving she was more than a survivor. She was a leader. 4-year-old Grace played with blocks in the corner, building towers and knocking them down with delighted giggles. She looked like Emma, with Catherine's sharp gray eyes. She would grow up strong, loved, safe. Catherine entered, elegant as always at 64. "The board is ready for you." Emma followed her mother into the boardroom where 15 executives waited. Emma took her place at the head of the table, Catherine beside her. "Let's begin." "Aye, Emma said. "First item, the Sullivan Foundation's expansion into Europe. We've identified 12 cities where domestic violence shelters are desperately needed." After the meeting, Emma and Catherine had lunch at a quiet bistro near the office. Grace colored in a coloring book, talking to herself in the complicated way 4-year-olds do. "How are you really doing?" Catherine asked. Emma thought about it. "Good. Really good, actually. I don't think about him much anymore. When I do, it's just nothing. He's nothing to me now, just a man in a cell who will die there. And the nightmares? Gone. It's been 8 months since the last one." Catherine squeezed her daughter's hand. "I'm proud of you. So incredibly proud." That evening, Emma received a letter. Prison mail. Her stomach clenched when she saw the return address. ADX Florence. Lucas. She almost threw it away. Almost. But something made her open it. The letter was 3 pages of tiny, cramped handwriting. Lucas begging for forgiveness, claiming he'd found God, asking to meet Grace, wanting Emma to set up a trust fund for him, suggesting he could still contribute to society if she'd just help get him released. Emma read it once, felt nothing. She walked to her fireplace and dropped the letter into the flames, watched it curl and blacken and disappear. Grace came running in. "Mama, what burning?" "Nothing important, baby." Nothing at all. That night, Emma tucked Grace into bed in their Brooklyn brownstone. The room was painted soft lavender. Stuffed animals lined the shelves. Books overflowed from the bookcase. It was warm and safe, and everything a child's room should be. "Tell me story," Grace demanded. "Which story?" "The princess story, the one about Grandma." Emma smiled and settled onto the bed. "Once upon a time, there was a brilliant princess named Catherine who built a magical kingdom. But an evil wizard tried to steal it and hurt her. So the princess became a warrior. She hid in faraway lands and studied magic for many years. And when the time was right, she came back and defeated the evil wizard forever. The end." "Wizard in jail?" "Yes, baby. The wizard is in jail and he'll never get out." "Good." Grace nodded firmly. "Bad wizards go to jail." "That's right. And good princesses grow up to be queens. Like you, Mama. Like you, my love. Like you." Emma kissed Grace's forehead and turned out the light. Downstairs, Catherine had made tea. They sat together in comfortable silence, mother and daughter, survivors and warriors, watching the city lights through the window. "Do you ever regret it?" Emma asked. "The 30 years you lost?" Catherine considered. "I regret that Lucas Harrington existed. I regret that I ever trusted him. But I don't regret protecting you. I'd lose another 30 years if it meant keeping you safe. I'm going to make sure Grace never needs to be protected like that. We're changing the world, one shelter at a time, one law at a time, one survivor at a time." "Yes," Catherine agreed, "we are." In his cell at ADX Florence Supermax prison, Lucas Harrington sat in darkness. 23 hours a day in an 8 by 12-foot concrete box. 1 hour of solitary exercise in a slightly larger concrete box. No human contact except for guards passing food through a slot. He'd been there for 3 years. He would be there for the rest of his life. Sometimes he screamed. Sometimes he pounded on the walls until his hands bled. Sometimes he lay on his cot and remembered the penthouse, the parties, the power. He'd written Emma dozens of letters. She never responded. He didn't know she burned them without reading. He'd filed appeal after appeal. They were all denied. The evidence was overwhelming. The 47 videos, the recordings, the testimony. There was no appeal from the truth. He would die in this cell, alone, forgotten. Exactly as Catherine had promised. Back in Brooklyn, Emma's phone rang. Detective Mitchell. Emma, just wanted to let you know we arrested another one. Another one? Wealthy businessman abusing his wife for years. She saw your story, got the courage to call us. We got him. He's going to prison. Emma closed her eyes. That's good. That's really good. It's because of you. Women are reporting now. They're believing they can escape. You're changing things. After she hung up, Emma walked to Grace's room, watched her daughter sleep, safe and loved. She thought about all the women who'd contacted the Sullivan Foundation, the thousands who'd escaped abuse, the hundreds who'd testified against their abusers and won, the policies that had changed, the laws that had passed. They tried to bury her. They hadn't known she was a seed, and now she was a forest, a whole forest of survivors growing stronger every day, helping each other, lifting each other up. Emma returned to the living room where Catherine waited. They didn't need to speak. They'd survived the unsurvivable. They'd fought the unfightable. They'd won the unwinnable. Mom, Emma said softly, thank you for never giving up, for waiting 30 years, for coming back when I needed you most. Always, Catherine said. That's what mothers do. We fight for our children until the very end. They sat together in the warm glow of the Brooklyn brownstone, two Sullivan women who'd faced monsters and won, planning tomorrow's battles in the war against violence. Outside, the city hummed with life. Somewhere in Manhattan, another woman was finding the courage to call the hotline. Another survivor was taking her first steps toward freedom. Another abuser was learning that money and power couldn't protect him from justice. The Sullivan Protocol was working. The movement was growing. The seeds were becoming a forest. And Lucas Harrington, billionaire philanthropist, humanitarian monster, sat alone in darkness, forgotten by everyone except as a cautionary tale. Emma Sullivan Harrington fell asleep that night with her daughter in her arms, her mother in the next room, and peace in her heart. She'd been beaten, but she hadn't broken. She'd been buried, but she'd grown. She'd been silenced, but she'd found her voice. And now that voice was changing the world. One survivor at a time, one story at a time, one victory at a time.